What's up, guys? Brady Figuel here, coming at you with another discography ranking, and today we're talking about the one and only Between the Buried in Me in preparation for their upcoming album, The Blue Nowhere, that actually drops tomorrow, or in a few hours. I thought that Deftones discography that I did was a lot of work. God. But this discography ranking is, without question, the hardest I've ever worked and the most time I've ever spent preparing for a video. These discography rankings in general are a bit more work than just a review, because instead of just focusing on one album, you have to spend time with a band's entire catalog. And the more, I find that the more nuanced the music is, then the more time you need to spend listening to it and re-listening to it and focusing on it. And Between the Buried in Me is the epitome of nuanced music. Luckily, it's really easy for me to spend time with their music just because of how rock solid their catalog is. Like, you'll see in this discography ranking, like, there isn't a single album by them that I don't like. And I think that's purely just merit-based because of how talented that these guys are. For me, the main criticism that I think I will have for them is that at times I do think some of their music gets a little bit lost in the shuffle, in a sense that they at times may try to do a bit too much at a time to where they lose track of certain driving forces of their songs, or songs just feel like they're a bit too sprawling and they don't have one particular idea. So as a result, certain albums just are a little bit less memorable. That's pretty much the boiling point of any criticisms that I will have for any of their records. And it's so funny just looking at my musical scope, because I just did that discography ranking on fucking Daughtry, mainly for shits and giggles. Making the jump from Daughtry to BT Band is like going from elementary school math to college level calculus or something. Before we get into it, I will say I do have a couple exclusions, which we can fight about in the comments, but it was mostly just to make this video a little bit easier for me. The first one being the covers album, The Anatomy of. I just don't think it's fair to rank a covers album among the rest of this band's material. And the other one, which might get me a little bit of flack, is the debut self-titled. I'm not going to count that because it is okay. It's not a bad album. I don't dislike it, but it is a little bit unrefined. There are obviously some foundations of what the band would become from that record, but in general, I feel like it's a really easy album to skip over, and I don't think it'll be fair to rank it among all these other records that are just, to my ears, way more advanced and way just beyond what they went for with that record.
Hey, it's me from the future. I just realized when I was editing this, I forgot to mention that I'm also, I combined Automata Parts 1 and 2 and Parallax 1 and 2, both into single albums for this ranking. So there's 8 total releases that I'll be ranking here, just to clear that up.
So all that being said, let's dive in to their catalog with the album that I have to put at last place. Yeah, I do have to. That's kind of how these rankings work. But don't get it twisted. I'm not saying this bottom album is bad. It just kind of has to be here. And that album is Colors 2. Colors 2. I think really the only reason this album gets put at the bottom for me is because of its title. Like, there's just the band really, it was a ballsy move for the band to follow up Colors, which is their most beloved album easily. And for me, it definitely impacts kind of the listening and how I view an album overall when it feels like it just doesn't really accomplish its goal. And if you're going to make a sequel to your most beloved album, like, it has to hold up. Like, if it doesn't hold up, then it loses points just because of that. But that doesn't mean the record's bad. It's just that rather than having the winding, mind-expanding qualities of Colors, it more just sounds like a solid progressive metalcore album, which for BT Bam standards puts it at the bottom of the list. And that's totally okay. Like I said, I still really enjoy this record. While it may arguably be their least experimental, there still is some genuine experimenting and qualities on this album that the band didn't do before. For one, the track Turbulent, for instance, has somewhat of an electronic synthetic element to it that I don't think the band has quite explored enough. I think that's one way that the band could still kind of touch on new elements and styles in their music, and this song at least hints at that a little bit. Fix the Error, too, has those 2 drum solos, one of which done by Mike Portnoy, which had to have been like a huge, like, amazing moment for the band considering how inspired they are, like, from Dream Theater. But this album, it takes the last place just because I don't fully think it accomplishes its goal. Like, you listen to a track like The Closer, Human as Hell, and it kind of does just sound like a microwaved version of White Walls, which was the closer off of Colors. Still a solid album, but it doesn't feel like it fully accomplishes what it was shooting for, which is following up fucking Colors. Top 3 tracks I'll give to Turbulent, Fix the Error, and Bad Habits, which to me is probably the most original Colors-leaning song on the record, both in its familiarity and its experimentation at times. At the number 7 spot, I'm given to The Great Misdirect. Somewhat divisive album in the band's catalog, and I'm more on the side leaning towards that I don't think it's one of their strongest works. For the most part, I think it has to do with my taste. Just this album's compact 6-song structure makes it a bit more impenetrable, at least from where I'm coming from. And kind of like I was alluding to earlier, this is kind of that main album that represents that criticism I talked about, where some of these songs are just a bit too drawn out. I find it a little bit hard to stay focused on them. A lot of songs on here, I kind of just started spacing out during it, which that in itself says quite a bit. For me, good music needs hooks and memorability, catchiness, stuff like that. And I think with this record and on a bulk of these songs, the band just try a little bit too hard to be all over the place and to do everything and to have these really expansive, long, drawn-out songs. And that as a main idea for a record doesn't really do it for me. But all that being said, there is still some awesome material on here. Like, don't think that I'm calling this record bad. Like, BT Bam is so talented that even their weaker material is still really fucking good. To me, this album is at its best when the individual tracks go for certain ideas, like Desert of Song, which is a track that has somewhat of a fitting name because the vibe of this song is very kind of barren and dry and desert-like. Also, the opener Mirrors, which has some kind of bluesy, clean guitars in the intro that I really like, and some really soothing vocals from Tommy, and then the track kind of just breaks into a straight-up, like, jazzy prog rock type song. And again, this is a song that is a bit more straightforward, and as a result, to me, is more memorable. And in terms of the songs on here that are a bit longer, I think Fossil Genera is probably my favorite as far as that group, because the individual parts in this track I find to be a bit more memorable. Like, you got the thrash riffing in the bridge, you got those metallic sound effects at like right the 4:30 mark that I think add a lot to the song. This is a very avant-garde type track, and it still has those kind of extreme elements, which avant-garde and extreme might be the 2 best words to summarize BT Bam's catalog. So yeah, still a really good album. It just, for my taste, the structure doesn't do it a whole lot of justice, and the songs overall feel a little bit less memorable and at times a bit bloated. Top 3 tracks, I'm going to give to the 3 that I talked about: Fossil Genera, Desert of Song, and Mirrors. Number 6, I will give to Silent Circus, their second album. And this, to me, is the logical start of the band's catalog. This is kind of the foundation of their sound, and pretty much all of their albums that follow this could immediately be kind of traced back to the Silent Circus, in my opinion. For one, it's probably the heaviest album on this list. Like, there's moments on here that not only build a foundation of progressive metalcore, but even like deathcore at times. There's a lot of extreme metal influence in this album, which I really enjoy. It makes it, for one, stand out a little bit more in the band's catalog, because not only is it maybe the most extreme, but the progginess is dialed down a little bit, at least as far as the odd time signatures and stuff like that, but the structures of the songs still are quite explorative and unpredictable. This is also maybe one of the band's most prominent metalcore sounding albums. A lot of the riffing on here reminded me of albums like Killswitch Engage Alive or Just Breathing, or As I Lay Dying, Frail Worlds Collapse. Just in a lot of the note choices and kind of the dissonance and discord that they bring to the song. I also think that sort of more raw type of production is pretty fitting for the record, and very much snugly fits it in its time period, just the fact that it came out in the early 2000s. There's also some riffing on here, like in the first 2 tracks, Colorophobia and Anabophobia, that just take on a bit more of a straight-up groove type of sound, which I always enjoy. And you have a track like Mordecai, which is probably my favorite song on here, where the band does amplify that prog a little bit more compared to other songs on here, especially in that kind of delicate, clean guitar break when the clean vocals come in. And then the way the song builds back up into that really tuneful solo, that's just ends up being a BT Bam staple, obviously, and this song is kind of the biggest foundation, I think, out of any other track on here. Top 3 tracks: Mordecai, Need for Repetition, and Ad the Gogomet. I don't know how to pronounce that. Number 5, another kind of divisive album in the band's catalog, Call Me Ecliptic back in 2015. The record that a lot of fans seem to view as them chopping off the metal and going for more of a straight-up prog rock type of sound, which I never quite fully understood, if I'm being honest. Like, yeah, it definitely dropped some of the extreme elements from the record, but this is still a prog metal album. Maybe in BT Bam standards, like I just said, it's a bit more melodic. Like King Redeem, Queen Serene, for instance. It still has the screams. It's a fucking heavy song. It's got the blast beat. With this album, it's interesting because it's kind of the opposite of what I said about The Great Misdirect, in a sense that there's more tracks on here. And the songs in general maybe do embrace a little bit more hooks at times. Like, I think The Coma Machine is one of their best songs ever. And it definitely is one of the hookiest songs ever, which there's probably a correlation there. And I think this somewhat more melodic sound benefits the band in terms of like Tommy's clean vocals, which to me are delivered a bit more confidently than the past works up to this point. Having more songs on this record allows for certain ideas to be more spread out among each track, and as a result, the tracks are a bit more memorable compared to an album like The Great Misdirect. But I can also kind of see where the detractors of this record are coming from because, for one, production-wise, I do think, especially with the guitar tone on here, it is a little bit scooped to my ears. And even I can't help but listen to this album and still kind of want to hear more of those extreme metal elements that aren't as much represented on this album. I do enjoy this album, again, fully, thoroughly, all the way through to the point where it makes the number 5 spot for me, but I feel like it just, the extremity and the lack of it makes it feel like there's just a little something missing, I gotta admit. But that being said, I still really enjoy it. Top 3 tracks, Coma Machine, Famine Wolf, and King Redeem, Queen Serene. Now we're getting into the top 4, and the more I got to the top, the more difficult it was for me to find these rankings. In particular, this kind of 4 through 2 spot was the most kind of difficult albums to arrange. I definitely rearranged them multiple times, but for the number 4 spot, I'm going to give it to Alaska. Slightly controversial, I realize. This is probably After Colors, their most beloved record, I think would be fair to say. And, I mean, for good reason. It's an awesome fucking album, as all these records are, especially now that we're at this point. To me, this record does a great job of taking that style that the band established on Silent Circus and refining it and building upon it, both in the style and the production, which is a lot more, again, refined and a bit more clean sounding. Again, very similar to Silent Circus, there are some pretty prominent metalcore and even deathcore vibes at times on this record, which I enjoy. I had to change the lighting a little bit, but this core influence really comes to life on like the opening track, All Bodies, which from the dissonance especially brings in more of a metalcore vibe, except obviously much more avant-garde. But the extreme metal influence is really here in this album as well, like when you listen to the title track, which has a lot of death metal influence. Also Croquis and Boat Shoes, which again has the death metal influence, but it's also contrasted with like these slower, doomier parts at times that I think is cool. There's the track Robo Turner, which pretty much has everything. I mean, it's a really chaotic song. It's got the guttural vocals. In the middle, there's like this black metal leading section that's spliced in there with some kind of eerie, evil-sounding tremolo guitar riffs. I think that part's awesome. And you got the groovy breakdown at the end to top it off. This is also the album where overall I think the band really hits their stride with some of the more melodic parts on here. For one, both of the interlude tracks on here, Breathe In, Breathe Out, and Medicine Wheel, are awesome. The track Backwards Marathon has a really cool, like, atmospheric melodic break. Selkie's The Endless Obsession is a top 10 BT Bam song for me of all time, without question. That bubbly synthy intro and a lot of that kind of contrast between those dissonant melodies, I should say, and you got that really jazzy guitar solo to kind of have that yin and yang effect, which is something this band pulls off really well. This song's a great instance of that. I think the band refining the sound from Silent Circus and overall hitting their stride is what makes this such a strong and, again, one of their most beloved albums to date. I can definitely see where people are coming from with that. Top 3 tracks, the title track, Alaska, Selkie's Endless Obsession, and Robo Turner. Coming in at number 3, I'm going to give it to the combined Automata. The songs on this record, to me, feel maybe like their most narrative-driven and their most focused songs, maybe in their entire discography. The tracks on here feel like they do a much better job at following specific ideas overall, as opposed to having a bunch of shit going on within them. Yet, despite that, these songs still have just as much dynamics and versatility as any of the band's best work. The best instance of that would be both of the closing tracks here, Blot and the grid. Blot in particular has this really cool like Middle Eastern type break that I think is really interesting. And these are two tracks that feel really grand and really epic, but they feel really cohesive at the same time, which is going to be my compliment for the top two albums that I will talk about. But it's really those more concise, driven, specific ideas taking up entire songs that make this album so memorable to me. Like the track Millions, for instance. It's this bright, emotional song the entire time. One of the moodiest songs this band has ever put out. It's one of those songs that it's so sonically full and rich. It just like encapsulates and entrances you the entire time. You also have the duo of Glide, the transitional instrumental, into Voice of Trespass on part 2. Both songs that kind of take on this prominent dark circus type vibe that I find especially interesting. And the way the heavy parts come in on Voice of Trespass later in the song, I think felt very seamless and smooth. The first two tracks on part 1 amp up the aggression and the meanness, especially Condemned to the Gallows, but House Organ as well. Just those mean intro chords, and then that cascading chorus section is just fucking vicious. And then the way that song transitions pretty much the entire second half into full-on jazz rock is it's mind-blowing. Top 3 tracks, House Organ, Millions, and Voice of Trespass. Number 2, I will give to the Parallax. Again, parts 1 and 2 combined into one album, as I'll be referring to it as. Very, very, very close second. I can't stress that enough. This is an album that really does pull off doing fucking everything it possibly can in individual tracks and on the entire record. These songs, with the exception of my number 1 album, do the best job of being long and drawn out and expansive and labyrinth-like and grand, while still maintaining this full circle quality, that they still feel like tight units of songs rather than being sprawling and all over the place and incohesive. Yet there's still specific moments on here that feel adventurous, most notably the quirky track Bloom, which I don't even know how to describe this fucking song. I think quirky and wacky is the best way I could put it. Just fucking listen to it if you haven't for some reason. The intro track and the closing track, Goodbye to Everything, both of which kind of having the same idea, same title, it's fucking awesome. The way that the band really saunters in delicately with the acoustic intro here on Goodbye to Everything 1. That's obviously a BT Bam staple where they start their albums off with some more kind of melodic, delicate type ideas. And in this album's case, the way that it does kind of start and finish with the same idea, at least for part 2, does make it feel like a cohesive unit and a cohesive story. This album also has my favorite BT Bam song ever, which is Silent Flight Parliament, which, given some of my criticisms early on, I think is especially saying something considering this song is fucking 15 minutes long. It just has everything. It is such a smooth listen the entire 15 minutes. It has the cohesiveness in a sense that intro part comes back near the end, but it's that ending part with, again, that intro part coming back with just that cascading orchestral section, which is probably my favorite moment on a BT Bam song ever. It's just so haunting and dramatic, and I love the feeling that I get from that part. The song also has some great riffing, same with the track Extremophile Elite. This really is, to my ears, the closest the band ever got to matching their number 1 album as far as quality. It has a lot of the same qualities that I will compliment on that record. Really the only reason it's at number 2 so clearly for me is because part 1 to me is just a bit less memorable than part 2. So that leaves my number 1 BT Bam album, what I believe is their best album, which is Colors. I mean, was there any doubt? This is one of the most beloved and acclaimed prog metal albums ever, like by any band. Before I get into this record, I have to shout out Ryan Paney. He did an awesome video on Colors years ago, which is actually what got me into the band and discover this album and discover all their other albums. So shout out Ryan Paney. I'm going to try and link his video in the suggestion cards. I'm not sure if I can link other people's videos, but if you love Colors, you have to check out that video. He does an awesome job describing it. As far as compliments that I personally can give this album, literally every single compliment I've had for all of these albums I talked about apply to Colors. Just the way the album just floats in with the intro track Foamborn, and then you get into the fucking heavy-ass track Decade of Statues right after it. Just the way those 2 tracks start out this album already just shows how much of a roller coaster ride this record is. And from there, it only gets crazier in the best way possible. My favorite moments on this record, just like Ryan says in his video, like I just mentioned, are those completely out of left field, like outside, out of the box influence moments. Like, there's so many of them, but like that tropical reggae-like section almost on Son of Nothing is a great one. The bluegrass section on Answer the Sky that actually has some like crowd chatter in the background, but feels so smooth and natural, especially considering that the melodies in that part actually do outline some other parts of the song. I think in particular it is the chorus. And there's like that wonky polka-like section on the track Prequel to Sequel, which is another just out of nowhere moment, but yet it flows so seamlessly back into the rest of the song. I also have to shout out the bass-driven interlude Viridian, which interlude tracks are not normally something I compliment. They're usually something I actively dislike on an album, but this track Viridian is maybe, it's got to be in my top 5 instrumental interlude tracks, period, by any band. Just an unbelievably beautiful song. And of course the closing track White Walls with that fucking epic guitar solo that closes out the record, which is one of the best guitar solos I have ever heard. And in the BTBM catalog, this album, it has the best heavy parts, the best melodic parts, the best performances, the best transitions from the heavy to the melodic, to the outside the box, back to the heavy, back to the melodic. There's really not enough I could say to talk about how fucking amazing this album is. So just go listen to it if you haven't yet. If it is your first time and you're just getting into this band and you're using this video as kind of a way to navigate, give this album some time. I know it definitely took some time for me. I think a lot of new fans to not just progressive metal, but metal overall, don't really take into account that metal, and especially an album like this, it's an album that you definitely have to try with. You have to want to get into it. You have to put effort in for it. That's something that I don't think a lot of other genres of music tend to require. But if you like any kind of progressive music, any kind of extreme metal, any kind of metalcore even, and you give this album, you put the effort in and you give this album enough time, it will grow on you and you will fall in love with it. Just trust me. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. You can tell how much time I've spent recording this fucking video because it is now dark outside. So comment below your ranking for BTBM's albums, and remember to hit the subscribe button. I will absolutely be doing a review of The Blue Nowhere once it drops, although I'll probably have to spend, give or take, a week or two with it before I can form my thoughts on it. So please do subscribe, stay tuned, comment below your ranking like I said, as well as any other discussions you would like to bring up with their catalog. That's the best part about doing these videos, honestly. And yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.